Welcome back. We're discussing euthanasia and the MAID program that exists here in Canada. And joining me again is Charles Lewis. Charles, before we went to commercial break, we're discussing the impact of the family of that person suffering or the person diagnosed. Excuse me. How does it impact a family? Maybe it's your child is ill and is opting for euthanasia, or like an adult child, or a grandparent or a parent. How is the family response to that? Or is something missing? Is something being taken away, or are they in unison?
Well, I think people react in the same way when there's a death in the family. And I imagine that, and I've heard things, Alex does a lot of work on this,
And Alex is
that
from the Euthanasia Prevention
Asian
Coalition Canada,
Prevention
right?
Coalition, sorry, yeah. But I think it's probably, here's the thing, and this is what I'm concerned about, right? Probably now I've known some people and they have real serious second thoughts after. Like, what did we do, right?
Mm,
Especially if the person is not so incapacitated. In other words, they seem to be alive and healthy, and then you kill them. But what I'm concerned about, I think everybody should be concerned about, is euthanasia has become much more accepted in society, right? I think eventually they will expand it to the mentally ill and to teens. So what happens then is, I know it seems a generation from now, families may accept euthanasia as being normal. In other words, forget about natural death.
right.
It'll be the option, the main option. And so if families start caring or they think this is the best thing for their loved ones, try to imagine the nightmare scenario that that is.
Yeah, no, it's a fair point. And I want to
Which
circle back to another point, actually. When you were mentioning that this is becoming kind of accepted or commonplace, you mentioned in the first segment that because I asked you are you so interested in given your background and your relatives that fought in World War II. It was a program that, like you're right, that Nazi Germany implemented, propagandized. It was being promoted. Of course, I don't think it was optional. Correct me if I'm wrong, but people were forced to be killed. It wasn't like people volunteered, "Oh, euthanize me," at least to my knowledge.
exactly, exactly. If you had a child that had some illness, women were concerned about bringing them to the doctor because if the doctor suddenly thought this was something other than just a cold or something chronic or a fault, they had to report it to the authorities. And then the authorities could come and take the child away. Can you imagine that?
Well, it's horrific, really. Is that a concern in Canada's MAID program? Are people concerned about going to the doctors? Obviously, not a child because minors are excluded. Are advanced or elderly patients concerned?
You know, most of what I've read is anecdotal, but certainly there was a period in Quebec where elderly people were succumbing to euthanasia because the doctors said it's an option. And
Right.
not all old people are the same, but a lot of older people, a different generation, if the doctor says it, it must be true. And if they don't have family to support them, you're alone, you're sick, in a hospital, and you think, well, what's the point? Why am I staying alive? I mean, that's a real issue. So, whether they're afraid of seeing their doctors, I don't think so. You can always have the option to say no,
Right,
right?
right.
But it depends on how persuasive the doctor is. And again, if you're young and you have a family around you, that's probably not going to happen. But if you're
And
old and alone,
right.
it's a different story.
And hearing back again about a discussion about the Nazi Germany program, and again, ours is opt-in, not mandatory. Um, but you mentioned also that we make continual advancements in medicine. So I think that's interesting because when I think back to Nazi Germany and their euthanasia program, whatever twisted, warped beliefs justified that, and it was a horrific belief and a horrific action. Like look at the advancement we've made on so many people that they felt were not contributing to society. I mean, like, look, there are many good people contributing to society. If that's your benchmark, there have been so many advancements. Why would one ever want such a inhumane option, let alone an archaic one? In some ways, I feel like we're kind of going back to this archaism if we're not keeping up with the advancements in technology. Like, why go there?
You know what? I think that I spoke to a Dr. Ed Rosatsky, who's a Catholic psychiatrist in Toronto, and he said that when many patients are presented with some thing, they undergo anticipatory anxiety and despair
Mm,
because they're now about to face a life of trials. I mean, for some people, their life is breezed along and suddenly, uh-oh, what's going on here?
Right.
And what they often do then is resort to attempts to avoid suffering, right? Now, you can avoid suffering by taking painkillers, but they may decide, I don't want to live through this.
That
And
it's
what
too
Dr.
much.
Zappi said is, unfortunately, they're shortcoming themselves